All right, today we're going to discuss how much protein you actually need for both building muscle and burning fat. Depending on what your current goals are, that amount of protein per day might actually be different. So whether you're trying to build muscle, maintain muscle, or burn fat, the amount of protein you should be having per day might actually be different. So that's what we're going to discuss here. So I'm going to be using my experience as a retired pro bodybuilder who made it all the way up to 260 pounds at 5'8" within only a few short years. As well as my experience with coaching hundreds of clients over the last 8 years. I'm going to be using the anecdotal evidence with that along with what the studies show. So the studies show that you need somewhere in the range of 0.7 grams per pound of body weight all the way up to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight of protein per day. That's quite a range. And then you're going to see studies, so many studies that land on a number somewhere between 0.7 grams to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. So this is quite a big range. If you're having 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, let's say you're a 200 pound person, that's going to be about 140 grams of protein per day. Versus if you're on the top end of the range of what the studies say, 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, that's going to be having you eat somewhere in the range of like 240 grams of protein per day. So this is quite a big range. So if you are, you could very well be undershooting protein or overshooting protein, and you could be allocating those same macro or those same calories to another macro like carbs or fat. So what I've seen within my experience, this is anecdotal evidence, is the reason why these studies vary so much is this does vary person to person. There's no magic number. Everyone likes to, all these fitness influencers like to throw out the magic number is 1.1 grams per pound of body weight or 1 gram per pound of body weight. And I can tell you that this very much depends person to person, just like everything else in nutrition and fitness. It's very, very person dependent. So unless you really, really have tested things within yourself and you've gone through multiple seasons of growing, cutting, you've been doing this for a long time and tracking meticulously, it's going to be hard to narrow down the exact magic number for you. And it also can depend on, how efficient of a growth phase you're in, or, how inflamed your body is, how well are you able to utilize the protein, all that. There's so many factors. So that's where choosing a sweet spot is going to be the most recommended. That's what fitness influencers are doing, is when they throw out a number of protein, they're giving you a number that should be somewhat of this sweet spot that keeps you kind of safe, that you're getting enough protein without way overdoing it. So like I said, it's going to range between 0.7 grams per pound of body weight up to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, depending on who you ask. Me personally, I have seen within myself and with many people, a lot of people tend to do better with more protein rather than less. I'm not saying you can't build muscle with less protein, because many people are able to, but you could be leaving some gains on the table if you are someone that utilizes protein a little bit less efficiently, or can utilize more protein a little bit more efficiently. So some people are able to utilize less protein, say the 0.7 grams per pound body weight amount, very efficiently, that they're able to build quite a bit of muscle off that, compared to someone that, might need 1.2 grams per pound of body weight to gain the same amount. On the flip side, someone might actually utilize more protein very efficiently, or the way their training style is laid out, the amount they're progressing, can utilize more protein. So whole point here is I, for most people, recommend setting the sweet spot at right about 1 gram per pound of body weight. That tends to be plenty for most people, without way overshooting it. With 1 gram per pound of body weight, this is a pretty easy number to hit for most people. It's very easy to calculate. If you're 200 pounds, you just need 200 grams of protein per day. And for most people, I don't see that it's leaving much on the table. You can be overshooting. I personally, the entire time I competed as a pro bodybuilder, I would have 300 grams of protein per day. And I do feel like for a lot of the time that was overkill. I feel like through some of my seasons, it wasn't overkill. When I was 260 pounds, I felt like I was utilizing the 300 grams of protein very well. And I've tested lower amounts of protein too, especially since retiring. And there are lower amounts. Like if I get under 1 gram per pound of body weight, I do notice my strength dropping, even if I have the, more calories allocated to, say, carbs. So this is very person dependent. But what I can say is most people are going to be great at right about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Now, that's what I would recommend for building muscle. Building muscle, you need to have your energy sources, there. So that's where I personally like allocating more calories than to carbs. You're going to have some people that like to skew more low carb and go with more fat, but this is where with 1 gram per pound of body weight, you can then allocate quite a bit of calories for carbs, which is going to give you the energy for the gym performance, that strength progression in the gym, that training progression is then going to lead to more muscle, and then the protein you're eating is obviously going to help you build it. So with that, when you're cutting, when you're trying to lose body fat, this is when you should skew your protein a little bit on the higher side. So let's say that you, through a building phase, are at 0.9 or 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein per day. This is where, as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into a cut, so as your calories keep lowering and lowering and lowering, I would actually skew the protein a little bit higher to where maybe by the end of the cut, you're actually at 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. One, your body weight's going to be coming down. So it's going to be, you could actually be keeping your protein at, say, 200 grams per day. But, as you come down and let's say you get down to 185, now you're, just by keeping it 200 grams, that you've now skewed the ratio higher. But then two, by increasing your protein just a tad or keeping it static at the number you have while your body weight comes down, you're now taking some of the calories that would be towards fats or carbs and keeping them with protein, which is going to help you lean out even quicker. Two, you also want to have the anti-catabolism of a little bit more protein. You want to have a really good safety net of being anti-catabolic as you cut, especially if you start getting really, really, really shredded. Once you hit a point to where, your body's, in quite a bit of a deficit, it helps to have a little bit more protein as a safety net to keep you from going super anti-catabolic. Now, another point I want to make, because this is one I get a lot, especially with a lot of my new clients that come to me and they are quite a bit overweight. If you are quite a bit overweight or you're currently obese and you're trying to, really, really get your physique in a better spot or become healthy, this is where I don't recommend eating 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you're 360 pounds, overweight, essentially, you're 300 pounds, whatever, you're not going to eat 300 grams of protein per day. That's way overkill. So what I recommend, if you are quite a bit overweight or you're obese, eat at your goal body weight. So if your goal body weight is, say, 240 pounds, if you're currently, say, 320 pounds and you want to get down to 240, eat, somewhere in the ballpark of 200 to 240 grams of protein per day. The reason I give that range is this really should be about how much lean tissue you have. So what is, if you stripped off all the fat in your body, how much lean tissue do you have? But it's kind of a safe ballpark to have of eating the amount of protein of your goal body weight per day. So if your goal body weight is 220, 240, eat that amount of grams of protein per day, and it'll get you in a really good spot. Obviously, then you need to have your other macros, the fats and the carbs, balanced out and in a good spot as well. But, you don't want to eat 300 plus grams of protein per day just because you're at that body weight. This is really more applicable to how much muscle tissue you actually already have on your body. That's why personally, for someone like me, having come from, my history as a bodybuilder, I utilize more protein than if I was, currently 215 pounds, but, a little bit more skewed to body fat. If I had more body fat on me and I didn't have a lot of, really dense muscle tissue with a lot of, just more quality built into there, it's just that kind of muscle memory and everything, I wouldn't be using protein as efficiently. But I need a little bit more protein because my body has been a lot heavier with a lot more muscle tissue. And, I don't have as much fat on my frame. Whole point here is if you have a lot more fat on your frame, you're going to be able to utilize or need less protein, at least in the beginning. And then you can skew it up over time as you get more muscular. But I hope this answers the question. This is one thing I get asked literally multiple times a week, and it really depends on how well you efficiently use protein, how much you like to eat. But I think for most people, a very, very safe number is 1 gram per pound of body weight. I know some people are going to say that's too much. Some people are going to say that's too little. And this is where it is person dependent. And it does very much vary, just like everything else in nutrition and fitness. There's not going to be a study that says you need this amount. They're making the best estimates essentially based off of, looking at multiple people. But in these studies, some people in the studies skew on one end of the range, others skew on the other end, and they're choosing, kind of the median or the average. So, just know that this is person dependent, and you're not going to know your sweet spot until you've done this for a minute. But a good place to start is 1 gram per pound body weight. Or if you want to be ultra safe, skew a little bit higher to 1.2. But I hope this answered that question for y'all. If you could, please go ahead and smash the like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Leave any comments or questions down below. All glory to God. God bless y'all, and have a great rest of your day.